An ordinary breakfast is interrupted by the doorbell. The father opens the door to find an unfamiliar face, claiming he wants a quick word with his son. Suspecting a journalist, the father moves to shut the door, but a gun barrel suddenly appears. Yusef immediately recognizes the real intent and steps forward to argue, but Sanders hasn't come to talk. A single shot rings out, and the family finally understands. This isn't a press visit. It's an execution. Months earlier, Yusef and 6 classmates had assaulted a 14-year-old girl, and walked away entirely unpunished, acquitted of all charges. The father protests that his son is just a kid who doesn't know any better. Sanders points out that the older daughter had witnessed the entire assault firsthand, and yet publicly declared online that the victim deserved what happened to her, simply because of how she'd been dressed, claiming she'd been asking for it. Turning to the father, Sanders asks how exactly he raised his children. The father insists it's simply the values of the Quran. Sanders fires back, "If you genuinely believe a woman deserves to be assaulted based on her clothing, why did you choose to immigrate here in the first place?" Their home country was torn apart by endless war. They'd fled to Europe seeking a stable, peaceful life. Sanders then orders Yusef to call the other 6 boys from that night to come over immediately. Reluctant to betray his friends, Yusef refuses through gritted teeth, until Sanders raises the gun and pulls the trigger. Forced into compliance, Yusef picks up the phone with trembling hands, calling each one in turn, telling them to come right away. Minutes later, the doorbell rings. Sanders has the older daughter answer it, ushering each arrival obediently into the living room. The remaining 4 trickle in one by one, and Sanders deals with each of them in turn, convinced that since the law failed to deliver justice, he would deliver it himself. Soon, a wave of immigration sweeps across Europe, accompanied by a sharp rise in assault cases. Fear spreads nationwide as innocent women fall victim day after day, while the government does nothing. That's when a vigilante emerges, delivering justice in his own way, targeting not only the perpetrators themselves, but also the indifferent officials who enable and tolerate the crimes. Public support for the vigilante grows rapidly, while international investigator Jack faces mounting pressure from his superiors to track down this mysterious figure as quickly as possible. Sanders, meanwhile, only grows bolder, openly speaking out online, condemning leaders for being unfit for their positions, accusing them of importing immigration purely to secure votes while ordinary citizens bear the suffering. Sanders believes that since ordinary people are powerless to act, someone has to stand up and do something. As tensions escalate and online momentum builds, pressure on the police intensifies. Through investigation and inference, Jack suspects Sanders may be connected to an international terrorist organization, possibly even linked to a mysterious power in the East. Meanwhile, Sanders is riding a public bus. Before each act of retribution, he always visits the victim first to talk with them. Shortly after the bus departs, 3 young troublemakers board. When the driver asks for their fare, they respond with nothing but abuse. In a hurry to get where he's going, Sanders pays their fare out of his own pocket and warns them, once seated, that everyone's actions ripple outward and affect those around them. His lecture, predictably, falls on deaf ears, and only irritates them further. One of the boys reaches for a knife, ready to teach him a lesson, but freezes the instant Sanders reveals a weapon of his own. The 3 get off at the next stop, with the ringleader, still defiant, flashing the knife threateningly as a final show of bravado. Not long after, Sanders arrives at the hospital to visit a victim named Ulsa, paralyzed in bed after being assaulted and extorted by Middle Eastern immigrants. Sanders asks what he wants. Confused, Ulsa assumes Sanders is police, and says, if it were truly possible, he'd simply want the law to take its course. Sanders shatters that illusion. Even if a conviction is eventually secured, it would take years for a verdict to come down. In the meantime, Ulsa would have to testify over and over, reopening his wounds publicly each time, recounting his trauma in front of strangers, while the defense does everything possible to paint him as a liar. Even after all that, the final verdict comes down to little more than chance. The entire process is long, expensive, and offers no guarantee that the perpetrators won't simply go on to hurt someone else in the meantime. Ulsa's face fills with anguish. He knows every word Sanders says is true. That despair etches itself permanently into Sanders' resolve, and he silently vows to make these men pay in blood. That same day, the immigrant gang responsible for Ulsa's attack pulls up in a luxury car, plotting to extort a nearby shop. The 3 men push through the door into total darkness inside. Moments later, one figure walks back out. The shop is left in ruins. Ulsa's vengeance has been delivered. The gang's deaths inevitably draw police attention. Jack rushes to the hospital to ask Ulsa if he has any leads, and that's when Ulsa realizes Sanders is the mysterious vigilante who avenged him. He deliberately gives police a false description of Sanders' appearance, but a chance encounter late one night ends up exposing him anyway. Jack happens to run into Sanders at a bar, where he notices 2 men and 2 women in the corner, hitting it off easily as strangers. When the 2 women step away to the restroom, the men's true intentions surface. They plot to spike the women's drinks. One of them, with curly hair, slips a drug into the glasses right then and there, ready for the moment the women return, drink up, and become easy prey. Sanders watches the entire scene unfold. He quickly fabricates a story that the 2 women are being harassed elsewhere, prompting the men to rush off to help. The moment they're gone, Sanders calmly swaps the drink positions, placing the spiked glasses in front of the 2 men instead. When the group reunites, none the wiser about the earlier mix-up, they raise their glasses and drink without hesitation. Within seconds, the 2 men collapse unconscious on the couch. Confused, the women turn to find Sanders approaching, who calmly explains the scheme that had been set against them. Shaken, the two women hurry away, while Jack quietly takes note of everything he's just witnessed. Sanders' fingerprints remain on the glass he used. Jack discreetly collects it, and through the print, Sanders' true identity is finally revealed: a former soldier, son of a now-deceased wealthy businessman, whose mother was killed by immigrants. He has no need to work. Simply collecting rent nets him $5 million a month. What Jack doesn't realize, however, is that this very bar is also one of Sanders' properties. Word of the missing glass reaches Sanders almost immediately, forcing him to accelerate his plans. The next day, Sanders heads out to visit another victim. Just as he steps out of his mansion, he runs into the same three troublemakers from the bus, now in a park, bullying and extorting a boy roughly their own age, stealing his phone and humiliating him without restraint. Sanders snaps the wrists of all three before walking calmly away. His next visit is to the girl who was assaulted by the 7 boys. He asks whether she's satisfied with the court's verdict. Of course she isn't. With the answer he was looking for confirmed, Sanders turns and wipes out the family responsible entirely. But even this isn't enough. Behind the rampant crimes committed by immigrant offenders lies the willful indifference of those in power. Sanders disguises himself as a police officer, claiming he has critical evidence to disclose to a judge. Catching the man off guard, he injects a syringe directly into his neck. The judge collapses limply into his arms, paralyzed, yet fully conscious. Sanders refuses to let him die without understanding why. The law is meant to protect the vulnerable, yet in this judge's hands, it had become a weapon shielding predators instead. Driving him out to a remote, desolate area, Sanders forces the judge to confront his own actions. The case of the 14-year-old girl assaulted by 7 men, which he had dismissed with an acquittal, claiming the boys were simply struggling to adapt and didn't understand how to integrate into society. Through hollow, self-serving justifications, the judge had let 7 guilty men walk free. If the 7 were the perpetrators, then he was their accomplice. Sanders pours liquor over the man's body, slits his wrists, and stages the scene to look like a suicide. Days later, Jack's investigation closes in further, finally pinpointing Sanders' location. At the same time, Sanders prepares for their arrival, locking himself behind a reinforced door with 2 loaded AK rifles standing ready. Soon, Jack arrives at Sanders' estate with a fully armed tactical team, shields leading the way, followed by a wall of rifles. But every step of it has already been anticipated. Sanders sets down his phone, puts on blast-resistant goggles, and fits noise-canceling headphones, calmly waiting for the assault team to breach the door. 2 flashbangs go off first, and the team floods into the room, weapons raised. But Sanders is hidden behind reinforced cover, and the bulletproof door absorbs every shot fired at it. What follows is a one-sided massacre. By the time Jack regains his bearings, the room is littered with bodies, and Sanders is already long gone, along with the revelation that the mansion's actual owner was never Sanders at all. Jack orders his men to cut through a final reinforced door, only to find it completely empty. The trap triggers instantly, and the room erupts in another wave of carnage. Even Jack himself doesn't escape unscathed. Days later, Jack survives, barely clinging to life in a hospital bed. A subordinate brings him a phone call, claiming it's from the prosecutor's office. But the voice on the other end belongs to Sanders. He asks Jack to relay a message to the government. The people will never accept this kind of failed governance. Jack, conflicted, understands better than most just how much devastation immigration has caused. But as a law enforcement officer, he's sworn to uphold order as it stands. Besides, Sanders has hurt plenty of innocent people too, including the officers who died in that mansion. Sanders says nothing further, simply asking Jack to deliver the message before hanging up. At that moment, the girl watches on television as the fate of the Muslim family becomes public, and her emotions finally break loose. This, exactly, is the justice Sanders set out to deliver. Soon after, Sanders releases a public video online, calling on everyone to reclaim what's rightfully theirs. The film ends here. See you next time.